Hello and welcome to the Kick in the Creatives podcast, hosted by myself, Sandra Busby, and my fellow creative Tara Roskell, offering you interviews, inspiration, motivation, and a gentle prod in the right direction. And for lots more information, challenges, and other useful tools to help you get creating, you can go to www.kickinthecreatives.com. And of course, this is where you can also find today's show notes. Enjoy the show. Welcome to episode 8 of the podcast, and today we're going to be talking about ways to make your sketchbook more interesting. And it proved to be an epic topic, so I had quite a task of editing it down to just 1 hour. In fact, I failed miserably. Meanwhile, in case you're interested, our next episode is going to be all about how to deal with negative feedback, and I'm sure that this is something all of us has experienced at one time or another, so do listen out for that one, and don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. Anyway, for fear of making this episode any longer than it already is, let's get to it.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the podcast. By the time this podcast airs, the April art challenges are going to be in full swing. I want to thank everybody who's taking part and sharing their work, especially in our really lively Facebook group. Also, just to let you know, we've been making some tweaks to our website. We noticed that it wasn't really working that well on mobile. You couldn't see all the challenges. So now really hope that it's really easy to navigate. So if you go and have a look on there, you can see everything that's coming up for the new year, for this year. And you can also realise that we're going to be adding challenges all the time. So keep on having a look there. And the best thing to do really is sign up for our newsletter, and we'll let you know what's happening the next month. So what have we got happening today, Sandra?
Just a quick mention, Cheryl Martin. We're getting lots of messages from people on our Facebook group. Cheryl Martin was one of them. She has suggested a poetry challenge. So we're going to be looking at that for later in the year. So like Tara said, we will be adding various challenges. So watch this space. Tara, I want to ask you, how are you getting on with the April challenge?
Well, it's obviously really early because we're recording this. It's the 4th of April in the morning. So I've only done 3 drawings so far, but I've been so far doing Imitation April. But as I mentioned before, I'm going to switch between the 3 challenges. And I am liking it, I think. I'm not totally committed yet. But what I was saying to I think it's KD, who's in our Facebook group, we were talking and saying how much you can actually learn about art history. Because I really hated art history at college. We used to have this woman, and we called her the she-devil. And it was, I don't know if you remember. Do you remember that TV program called The She-Devil?
It rings a bell, but I can't remember what it's about.
Yeah, there was this, she was like quite a big woman with like long hair, and she was very scary, and she turned into this she-devil, and we all thought this art history teacher looked like her, and she wasn't very nice. So she didn't know that was her nickname. But anyway, everybody used to try and skip out and not go to her lessons because it was quite dull. But we were thinking how if you were to do an art history lesson like this, because basically everybody at art college, they just want to paint and draw. So if you'd have got us all sort of looking at art, and then we had to create a piece in the style of a certain artist, it'd have been so much more fun.
Yeah, it really would. I totally agree. Funny enough, art history is something I wish I had done.
Not with the she-devil.
No, not with the she-devil. But when I went to college, I actually found that really fascinating, and I was asked to look up the Blue Riders and research the Blue Riders.
Who's that?
Well, they were a group of artists, and actually, I think Kandinsky was one of them. Paul Klee was another, and there was all these different ones. And actually, a couple of your ones, I think you did a Kandinsky, didn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I felt very clever because I was thinking, oh yes, I know Kandinsky. Yeah, you should look them up, and it was quite good. I think there was 7 of these artists. They kind of created this movement, and I found it really fascinating, and I was quite surprised at the time, thinking I'd like to have done art history, but because I did a lot of research myself on old the ways of painting, classical paintings. I did learn quite a lot, actually. So there are various artists I do know of, and every now and then I can pretend to be really intelligent. But yeah, I actually quite like it. But it's like you say, it's such a good way of learning a bit of art history. Yeah, I hadn't thought of that.
But I was actually looking at Google Culture. There's that little app. Have you seen that?
No.
Basically, Google have got an app called Google Culture. It's also a website, and it lists artists by, you can either search by artist, search by movement. It's really good, and it just tells you a little bit about each one. But I was looking through some of them, and I have to admit, some of them are just complete rubbish. You've got to admit.
Well, I have a different name for Jackson Pollock. I'm not going to say what it is, but I use a different surname. But everyone's to their own. Yeah. And it's not the painting; it's the fact that he made. I presume, I don't know. I haven't. That's one person I haven't really researched. But you sort of think these famous artists have made a lot of money. You'd think, wouldn't you? And you kind of think, that's what I don't quite get. You'll get someone spending a lot of
marketing, maybe.
Yeah, I think it is a bit marketing. But yes, I'm doing the Quick Kicks challenge because I want to get a new sort of painting started soon. Because obviously, as you know, I've just sent my other one to Massachusetts and it got there yesterday. And I kind of need to get something else on the go now. But if I'm going to do that, I need to put a challenge. I need to set the challenge to be something that will fit in around that. Because obviously the painting is my biggest priority then. So I thought I'll do the Quick Kicks. It's actually really hard. Some people are interpreting it different ways, I've noticed as well, because some people are almost doing continuous line drawings. It's absolutely fine, whatever way you want to do it. But I'm sort of thinking of it as more just sort of 10 strokes of a pen. And like we said, the stroke sort of is classed as putting from the minute you put your pen on the paper to the moment you lift it off. So if you can do it in one continuous line, then hats off, because I'm rubbish at that. Some of the drawings that people are showing us, I think, have been really good. But once again, I know I said I was going to follow the prompts, didn't I?
You did, and you didn't, did you?
No, day one. I looked at day one and I thought, nah.
You wrote them. You wrote this lot.
I know, but it just depends what I feel like at the time. I really love figure drawing as well, and that is something I really want to work hard on. And I think that's why I kind of are doing these dances, I think, because you've got all these different positions and stuff. And but doing it in 10 strokes, that's really quite difficult. So, but it's, it's quite interesting trying to do it. We've got a real mix in the group of what people are taking part in, haven't we? And it doesn't seem to be at the moment. I mean, we are only on day 4, but at the moment, it doesn't seem to be that there is one particular challenge that's the most popular, whereas in March, I think it was definitely 5-minute March was the winner, wasn't it?
Yeah, I would say Quick Kicks again.
Do you think?
I purely think because, I mean, I actually had a go at Quick Kicks last night. I just didn't post it because it was very bad. But,
aren't you the one that always says we need to share everything?
but do you know what I did though? I did share. Well, I did one of the things we're going to talk about in this episode today. I did a very bad one, and then I covered it up with a piece of paper and did my Matisse over the top.
I love that Matisse one.
Did you?
I really, really liked it. I mean, I know that was one of 3, but that is my favourite so far. I loved it. I like Matisse.
But the only trouble I do find with that challenge is I do really feel like I'm copying, which I know I am. I'm obviously taking influence. And I guess what you have to do is...
Well, you're emulating. You're not copying.
Yeah, so I'm not copying his paintings, but I'm taking kind of his style. But I suppose what you have to think then is if you like one of those things you're doing, like say I enjoyed the cut paper maybe, then you've got to then try and develop that and make it your own. I guess that is the long-term thing is that's the idea behind it.
I think it is a really, really good challenge to do if you are looking for your style, because you try things that perhaps you wouldn't normally. I'm sure you wouldn't normally cut bits of paper out, stick it down and think, oh, I'm going to try and, do you know what I mean? Or do any kind of Picasso type thing, but you're doing it and like you say, you there's elements of it you like and elements you don't. And that might help you find your style.
You never know.
Even though I think you already have one.
God, here we go again.
But yeah, so you certainly don't get bored on that Facebook group at the moment.
Yeah,
There's just
definitely.
like all sorts going on. It's really great. But today's episode is all about how to make your sketchbook more interesting. And we've got lots of suggestions that help make your sketchbook into a work of art in itself, and something that I think everyone is going to want to pull off the shelf. I just think it's nice to turn a sketchbook into something individual and something that's fun right from the get-go.
Yeah.
How about you?
Yeah. Well, I have these two things. So I have these sketchbooks I'm doing for these challenges that I like to try and keep most of the stuff together, I guess. But then I'll also have like a naff old, cheapy sketchbook that I'll just doodle and whatever, in. So I guess I have two kind of things. And I think one of the things you need to think of, so like the one I doodle in will just be a cheap, I think it cost £1, ring bound thing. It's just cheap cartridge paper. And then for the ones I'm doing for these challenges, I'll use a Moleskin it's a watercolor Moleskin, and that's got watercolor paper in. So what you need to think about is what you're going to use this thing for. So, if you're just going to be doing sketches and sort of dry media, then, a cartridge sort of paper is fine. Anything sort of smooth and is absolutely fine. But if you're going to put water and washes on it, you need to think about getting a heavier weight, maybe a watercolor book, something like that, because otherwise they're going to, buckle and not be very nice. I don't know, what sort of thing do you use for your work?
Well, I spent probably about £30 on the sketchbook I'm using
Wow.
now. I know, but it's a hardback and it is really big, which I like. But I was really disappointed to find that even though I have the size and I have the book, the hardback and all the rest of it, the paper inside, it just ripples with even the tiniest amount of moisture on it. So I was so disappointed about that. And also when I draw with ink, it depends what pen I use, but sometimes it just bleeds through to the other side, which is really, really annoying. So I tend to just use pencil in this sketchbook. It's a bit boring, really. But there are some really, really lovely looking sketchbooks out there. Have you seen those like gorgeous leather-bound books that you can get in places like W.H. Smith? They're the ones like you normally find on the plastic stand, and they look like they've come straight out of like Hogwarts or something. Should be full of spells or something, and they look absolutely gorgeous. Have you seen them?
Well, I've got one actually on my bookshelf, and I was going to talk about it later, but I think it's leather. It's actually my partner's stepmom got it for me, and it's got handmade paper in it with little flowers pressed into it. It's
lovely.
cheap to draw, but it's too good to use. So it's sat on my bookshelf for about 10 years.
Oh, well, surely now you can start using it.
No.
But some of them, obviously not that one, but there are some of them that they look beautiful.
Yeah.
But like you say, they are then very scary to draw in.
Exactly.
But the quality of the paper isn't always all that. I've looked through some of them, and they're great for just writing in, or if you're just journaling or whatever.
Yeah.
But if you want to use it as a sketchbook, you do have to look inside and look at the quality and the thickness of the paper. And ideally, you want to be able to add watercolors at the very least, or ink. I know that the next sketchbook I've got, well, I've just bought it actually. I'm hoping it's going to be a good one. It's Strathmore, and I think that one, it does say it can take various mediums, so let's hope. So the next thing to decide on.
Well, I just going to go back when you were saying about markers, using markers in that thing. If I've got a cheap book, a thin paper, just stick a bit of computer paper underneath it. If you're going to use a marker, it doesn't bleed through. Then you're just going to bleed through onto the cheap paper, either tracing paper or computer paper. Put it underneath.
Yeah, that's a good idea, but I like to use both sides of the page.
Ah, okay, got you.
Do you see what I mean? Yeah. So I'll sketch on one, and then I'll turn it over, and then I'll sketch on the back of it.
Yeah.
And that's what's annoying, because obviously you're drawing on it, but you've got this other thing coming through. So that's why I find it annoying.
Oh, I don't like using the other side. I can't use the other side.
Why not?
I don't know.
But you get double the amount of pages.
I don't want to use the other side.
Oh, you take my sketchbook. It's got sketches and everything. It's got like about 5 on each page, and Both sides, yeah. No, I like to use every bit. But the other thing to decide is whether to choose a ring binder or a hardbound sketchbook, and also whether to go for a softback or a hardback. So let's start with the benefits of a ring binder. So I suppose you can pull the pages out. So if you make something really dodgy, you can just pull it out and chuck it away and no one needs to know. And you can flip the cover right back on itself, and that makes it easier to handle when you're outside and obviously more rigid to draw on. But problem being, the rings can get in the way, especially if you're left-handed. And I only know this because my son's left-handed and he tried to do something write something down in a ring-bound book and he couldn't do it because if you're left-handed, the rings just get in the way.
Oh, right.
So think about that one. Yeah. It's really difficult to make a sketch across 2 pages as well because obviously you've got these rings in the way and they're bulkier to carry around. And I've had them in the past and you sort of take them out your handbag and it's got all sorts of crap sort of all caught in the rings, whatever.
Wrappers and stuff.
Yeah. So that's another downfall. And obviously they're more fragile because quite often the rings can get bent. So you can obviously get sketchbooks that have got hard covers, but you can also get the paperbacks as well. Personally, I only use those paperback sketchbooks in the studio for like roughing out compositions and things like that. Paperbacks are a lot more flimsy. They're really easily bent and damaged if you carry them around. So if you want your kids one day to find your sketchbook up in your loft, then you want it to last. And if you seriously want to create a series of sketchbooks, then go for a hardback. If you look after them, they last for years. I mean, they're really sturdy for a start. They can take a real battering in the bottom of your handbag. And quite honestly, I think when they do look a bit battered, I think they look more interesting anyway. It's easy to create a double page spread. They're much easier to carry around because you haven't got those bulky rings. And obviously they're ideal for left-handed people. Personally, I don't think there are any cons to a hardback. You can't tear a page out. Well, that's not the end of the world. And you can't fold them backwards. But apart from that, that's certainly my own preference. So what about you? What do you like?
It depends again. Like the cheapy ones I use, like you were saying, in the studio. Oh, I don't really care with those. I'll have something. It's got like a thin card cover, not a hefty thing. So yeah, I don't really worry about those. But if it's something I want to keep, the kind of Moleskins, I don't know if you call those hardback or softback. They've got a reasonable amount of bulk to them, I guess. So yeah, they're things you'd want to keep. So yeah, it all depends what I want to do with it, really. But if it's for these sort of challenges, that sort of thing, where I might want to keep them, yeah, I'd rather go for something a bit better.
I hear a lot about these Moleskins, and funny enough, I've had Moleskins and I don't like them. It's really strange. I had a the smooth. I think when you open it up, the paper in it is quite smooth. It's not 100% white, but the paper is so smooth. I don't like it. It's almost like drawing on an iPad. It's really slippy, and I find it really odd. And I tried to find one once with watercolor paper in it, but I could only find it was a really weird sort of shape, and it was really small. I haven't yet found a Moleskin that's big enough that's got watercolor paper. I don't know if I'm missing something.
Yeah, they do A4 ones. I know that.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Really?
You get them on Amazon. Yeah, I mean, I'm using a little one. It's only like 13 centimetres by 10 centimetres.
Yeah.
Which I prefer because I think if you're doing something every day, if you keep it, well, for me, if I keep it small, I can do it quicker. What I want when I do every day. But yeah, I'm sure they do A4. I'm not sure about bigger than that. But I haven't used the sketchbook ones, only the watercolor paper ones. And I've only started using them recently, actually. But yeah.
They're quite expensive, aren't they, as well?
Yeah. I mean, I think the little one was about a tenner and it's only tiny, but I do like it. I did have, for the last challenge we did, I had an A4 watercolor one. And that was really cheap. I mean, it's got 40 sheets of paper in it. And that was about a tenner, which I thought was pretty good for that. But they seem to stop making those. And that was a company called Mozart, Mozart. Yeah. Oh, yeah, it might be Mozart.
That takes me back to a previous episode. Yeah. We won't go into.
Do you want to go on to colours because it depends whether you want to use a white sketchbook as well, or are you still talking on that one? Have I interrupted you?
No. If you want to talk about colours, yeah.
So
Colour of the paper inside, you mean?
Yes, exactly. So, you might want to go for a plain white sketchbook, or you could go for black, grey, tan, or a pale colour. Now, sort of the Moleskin I'm using, that's that kind of whitey, creamy sort of colour. But I do really like using coloured papers. So what I've been doing for the challenges is, because I want to keep everything together, I'll just cut a piece and stick it in the book. I mean, you can make your own sketchbooks if you're that way inclined. But a couple of papers that I really like, there's this. It's called Curtis Ward Bockingford Rainbow Mixed Shade Artist Watercolor Paper Pad, and that's got really pale watercolor papers. Have you tried these?
No, I've never even heard of them.
So they've got in it, I think you get about 10 sheets, but you get like a cream, a very pale blue, it's kind of a pale greeny colour, and a really pale grey. And they're not dark by any means. They're very, very pale, but it's just really nice to start on that surface, with sort of a colour to the surface, a bit of tone under there. And then you can just add those white highlights that really sort of bring things to life at the end. And I think we were talking about the Strathmore. Is that the one you were just talking about? The toned mix?
Yeah.
That's
what I've bought, yeah.
I've got those as well. You can get a Strathmore toned mixed media paper, and they come in both tan and grey. They're a bit darker than the ones I mentioned before, but again, quite nice to use. They're a lot smoother as well, whereas the Bockingford, the pale watercolour, that's got a bit more tooth to it. Are we onto the cover?
Yes, the cover, and it's funny. we kind of started briefly talking about this earlier, didn't we? And we've got you were kind of horrified when I suggested to cover the cover. and we've got really different opinions, because now I remember when we used to go to school, and we're about the same age, aren't we? So I wondered if you used to have to do this as well. But at our school, at the start of a new school year, we'd get our exercise books. They're just boring old exercise books you get. And one of the first things we had to do is we had to go home and cover them. And I used to love it. I used to love that, because it was kind of our chance to make it individual to us. And we can do the same with our sketchbooks. And it's a way of adding some personality to the cover and making it instantly look like something more curious and worthy of looking at. But you were, like I say, you were horrified when I suggested that. Why is that?
Well, I remember covering those books, and I always just think, what a waste of time. And I used to get this. Do you remember that Fablon? Do you remember that stuff called Fablon?
No.
It was like sticky back plastic, but it had a pattern on it, and I just wanted them covered as quickly as possible. So, being me. So we used to try and cover them with Fablon. And have you ever tried to get that on without getting any bubbles in it?
Well, no, because I've never sort of heard of it.
Anyway, so this Fablon.
Is it like what you put on a mobile phone? The screen cover where you've got to sort of scrape the bubbles out.
But it's actually sticky. So what it was like a kind of plasticky sort of sheet, and then you'd peel the backing off, and the whole thing was sticky. So you'd have to start at the edge of your book, and you'd be trying to flatten it down, and one bit would be trying to stick to the other as you're trying to do it, and it'd just drive you nuts, and you end up with wrinkles in it. Anyway, so I used to hate doing it. So if I can admit, I've never, ever covered a sketchbook.
As somebody who's so creative, I would have thought that at school you would have loved doing that.
I hated it. I didn't mind doing drawings inside stuff, but no, never, ever interested in that.
Thing is, you got told off for drawing inside the books, didn't you? But you weren't told off for covering them.
Well, I remember doing this exercise. I think it was French it was for. And I thought, the only way I'm going to get a good mark in this project is if I do a nice drawing that goes with it. And so I remember drawing. It's a project you had to hand in, and I kind of remember drawing a horse or something to go with it, and I got a really good mark. And I don't think it was for my French.
But no, I like it. I think it adds a bit of personality to the cover. I've been put off buying some sketchbooks in the past because the cover's a bit naff. So you can always make it more interesting by covering it yourself. So have you seen those Reeves canvas covered sketchbooks that you can kind of paint on? Have you seen those?
No.
Oh, right. So I'm sure it's Reeves, and you go into any art shop, and I'm sure most of them have got them. Some of them are really big. But what they've done is they've actually made the cover, or, the back and front cover, they've made it out of canvas covered board, so that you can literally bespoke paint it. You can do what you want with the cover. The only trouble is, while I love that idea, I'm not sure that the paper in those can take anything other than, pencil or pen. So I don't think it will be for everyone. But you can easily cover any sketchbook and make it your own. I think it's nice to make it look like something that somebody would want to pull off the shelf. So if it's on your, on your bookshelf, and somebody will look at it and think, oh, what is that? And want to take it off. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So come on then. I know that
All
it's
right.
not your thing, but if you had some ideas to cover,
well,
what would they be?
My sketchbook did actually get covered last night. Yeah. But not in the traditional sense. Right. It got covered by a Labrador. Because I left it on the sofa. I'd been drawing, right? And my dog didn't used to be allowed on the sofa, but about a year ago, when we'd had a few drinks on a Friday night, we invited him up, and it's sort of stuck since then.
Oh, that's legal, isn't it?
I
Once
know.
you get them up.
Yeah. So anyway, last night he'd been sitting on the sofa with me. Then he got down, and then I'd been doing my drawing for the challenge. So I had bits of paper everywhere, and I put my moleskin down on, because we've got like a corner sofa. I put that down, went out the room to salute, come back, there's the dog lying on my moleskin.
But if you'd have covered it in Pritt stick first, you could have had a nice hairy cover.
But proper suggestions, if you don't want to cover it with your Labrador, you could cover it with brown paper. That what you could do that would actually be quite nice is you could do a doodle on the brown paper in black and white, kind of John Bergman-ish. Yeah, I got it in. Or, and you can tell this is your suggestion that I'm reading out, you could punch a hole in the cover and add a ribbon or a tag.
Yeah, kind of like, if you wrap something in brown paper and then you put one of those old-fashioned post office tags on it. Yeah, and you could then you could write your name and address if found, or whatever, or rather if lost.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was a great idea.
you know when I'll be doing that, don't you?
Go on.
Never. Go on. You must have some better suggestions.
Well, I love the idea of covering it in something like newspaper or pages from a novel, or like music sheets or something like that. But even, and this is another thing I think would look really interesting, is, you're going to laugh at this, even like old shopping lists or other scrap bits of paper you find with your own handwriting on. I don't know if you've got like a man drawer. We have a man drawer in our kitchen, and it's full of man stuff and bits of metal that are really boring. I don't know what they are, but there's also in the bottom, there's like old bits of paper that people don't know what they are, so they just throw them in the man drawer. But, and you've got little old bits of handwriting on it. Remember to feed the dog at 4:30 or blah, blah, blah. I don't know. And you could literally use all these little bits of scrap paper and use it as like a collage even. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And cover it that way. And it kind of makes it a bit individual. Now, if I was sitting on a train, I don't know about you, but whenever I'm on a train or anything like that and I see someone, because most of the time people are on their phones, aren't they? They're just sitting there on their phones.
Yeah, I don't get that. I don't get that. Yeah.
Yeah, they sit on their phones, or they're on their iPads and doing presumably some work or whatever. And then you get the person who's got a book in front of them and a pen, and they're doing something in this book with their pen. And I'm so nosy. All I want to know is what they're doing. And even if I have to make a trip to the toilet, I just want to see what they're doing in their book. And I've done that before. And this woman, she was doing, it was literally doodling. She was just doing patterns.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know why. I found it really fascinating, though. But if there was a woman or a man drawing in just like a boring old, black book, yeah, I'd still be intrigued to know what they were doing. But then if there's another book, and the cover's really interesting, and it's like, there's handwriting all over it, I'd be even more interested. I'd really want to have a look at that book, because you can imagine if it's that creative on the outside, what's it going to look like on the inside. But that's just me. I'm a bit sort of nosy, I suppose. But that's why I think it's quite appealing to try doing that. It makes it your own. It makes it look a bit more interesting right from the get-go.
See, I actually now would not want to cover my book because you're going to get weirdos trying to look at it.
Weirdos like me.
Exactly. But have you heard of decoupage?
Decoupage. Yeah.
I'm saying it wrong.
I'm sure it's called decoupage.
It probably is. Anyway, that's similar to collage, isn't it? But I know you can seal the whole thing in.
Yeah.
With glue. And I was watching these videos yesterday, actually swatting for the podcast, and a woman was using, which I thought was quite a cool idea, paper napkins, and she'd got like ones that it'd got like flowers and stuff on them. She'd cut those out, and then she'd like torn off the top layer and then was putting this decoupage.
It'd be funny now if I'm wrong and you're right.
She's putting that glue over the top. But I was thinking, instead of that, a really similar idea is I've been experimenting with some tissue paper. I saw these YouTube videos on people using painted tissue paper, and then they use them in mixed media. But what I've done is, because I'm not overly keen on getting the paint out, I've just used Inktense pencils on the tissue paper, and then I've put water on it, to sort of try and get an effect. But you could take those, you could decorate them yourself, and then glue those down to the paper, because you get like it's quite thin then. It doesn't sort of take up much, it's not like you've got bits sticking out. So if you painted your sketchbook in a single colour first and then started putting your bits on top of that could look quite nice.
Yeah, and I think actually adding glue over the top of, what I suggested about scrap paper and that, you'd have to glue them on, obviously, but it might be a good idea to glue over the top because it seals everything, doesn't it? It stops it being able to be ripped off.
Or you could use sticky back plastic.
Oh, I haven't heard that. I have not heard that phrase since Blue Peter. The days of the spaceships made out of the fairy liquid bottle.
So another one you could do is you could cover your book in fabric, or you can get those fabric paints or fabric crayons, or even plain old acrylic paints will work absolutely fine on material. I remember in the past, painting T-shirts with acrylics and I remember painting an old blouse years and years ago, an old white blouse with flowers. I can't believe I wore that, but I did.
Was that back in your art college days by any chance?
Do you know, I think it might have been just after art college days or around that time, yes. How about you? Have you got any more ideas?
Well, handmade paper, I suppose that's another one, isn't it? But you can actually buy handmade paper, like Indian paper and all this stuff, which would be nice. But yeah, there's lots of ideas. Comic books, comic strips, anything you like. I just think... personally, I think it's a lovely idea. I definitely, because the book I'm working on at the moment, is just plain black, and
I like black.
It's boring. It's a bit boring though. It's a bit boring. So I'm going to cover my black book. But I'll tell you what else I'm going to do, because, like I say, the ink kind of bleeds through, so it's very much, pretty much mainly pencil. I want to find ways of making my inside pages more interesting, and I'm going to wait till I finish the book, and then I'm going to go back, and then I'm going to start adding interest. So yeah, hopefully I'll find a few ideas. But anyway, just quickly onto the cover still. Another idea I thought would be quite nice is adding like almost like a Polaroid photograph. Remember the old Polaroids?
Oh yeah.
A photo of yourself, like a headshot, and then secure it on the front with washi tape.
You've got a really nice photo, actually, haven't you? You could use a really nice signed photo of me.
Oh, yes. I could make you a sketchbook, a bespoke sketchbook with your face. Oh, that was so funny. Yeah. So something like that would be really good. A really silly face. Secure it with washi tape.
Silly face.
But I'd like to think you don't normally walk around looking like that with your tongue hanging out.
Just in case nobody knows, this was I did a silly selfie for one of the challenges that the word was selfie, and Sandra thought it would be really funny to draw me because I posted them online, and so then I sent her through the post a nice signed photo of me that she could keep forever.
Yeah, it's brilliant. I laughed. I couldn't stop laughing when I received that. It was so funny. But yeah, so I think that'd be a nice idea, putting a photograph of yourself on it. And washi tape. I love washi tape, but I'd only heard about it recently and I ordered some. Have you got any of that?
I've got some somewhere. I've never actually used it. Why is it called washi?
I have no idea, but it's all sorts of patterns and colours and little tiny stickers and long strips and all that. So I like it because when you want to secure something in your book, it's just a lot nicer than sellotape. It's just more interesting. But one more idea as well, if you've got a hardbound book, you can write on the spine. So I've seen this before, like on a black book, that it's written in, like, you can buy those oil-based white thick pens, can't you? Or there's metallic pens or whatever. But you can write on the spine. So maybe the date, or rather the year that you're using that book, a volume number if you feel like making a series of books, and your name or whatever. But if you imagine, if you want to, one day have like a shelf full of your sketchbooks, and maybe you want to aim for a volume of 10 volumes or something, and you could have them all kind of in a row with the spine showing, and you'll know straight away what they are.
I've actually got a load of idea books and they're all black, they're not really sketchbooks. They're just like silly things. So I might put in ideas for stories, ideas for little product ideas, but it's so bad. They've just got freezer labels on the front and it says book 1, book 2.
Well, I hope you're going to do something about that.
Of course I am. Right. On to the actual pages themselves. Have you finished on the covers?
I have.
Yeah. Onto the actual pages. So if you feel daunted by the blank page, you can always create a background on your sketchbook first, then work over the top. And I call these pre-messed up pages. There are lots of ways you can do this, and I think you've got the first suggestion.
Well, yeah, so you could try laying down a random wash of watercolor or acrylic before you start. And I wouldn't be able to do this in my book because it would ripple all over the place. But as long as you've got a book that takes that kind of medium, you could certainly try that. So you could actually do that on all of the pages before you even start using the book. And if nothing else, it will at least obliterate that sort of scary blank page. But you can experiment with backgrounds and then you can work over the top of them. So for instance, you could stick different surfaces onto your pages with double-sided sticky tape and draw over them. So as an example, you could sketch over a music sheet, or you could draw on the page of a novel or on the sheet of a newspaper. I know I keep talking about newspaper and things like that, but I once saw somebody do some beautiful charcoal figure drawings on a sheet of newspaper, and then she framed them and they were beautiful. They were so lovely, and they would not have looked the same if they were just on white paper. So you could literally just cut out surfaces of your choice and stick them down, in your sketchbook and create backgrounds that way.
We've mentioned it before, but you can use tone paper, colour paper, black paper, or you could even use found surfaces. Like you could use bits of an envelope or a cardboard box or Hessian. I was looking at some origami papers the other day. Have you seen them? They got all sorts of
Colours.
Yeah, all sorts of patterns on them as well.
Oh no.
So they're all patterns. So I guess you can also get like the Japanese papers that have already got patterns on them. So you could try working on top of one of those. And I did actually, when we did Art Journal January, there was a journal that actually came with all different surfaces in it. It was called a Ranger Dinah Wakely Media Journal. And inside it had got, and I'm not quite sure what burlap is. What's burlap? I should look that up. Anyway, so it's got burlap, canvas, cotton rag watercolour paper and craft surfaces. So I thought that was quite a nice idea because at least, you start and the book's already obviously bound together for you and you've got these different surfaces to choose from. And I almost went for it, but then I chickened out and went for a plain one. But yeah, it might be something to look into. We also had some suggestions in our Facebook group to use cling film on top of watercolour to create a nice effect. And I tried this out, and what you do is just lay down a wash with, say, a few different colours of watercolour, and while it's still wet, you get some cling film, lay it over the top, and then start scrunching it sort of together. So you sort of move your fingers inwards, and then you leave it to dry like that. And then once it's dry, you take it off and you've got all these little kind of white bits and little cracks, and it's quite a nice little effect anyway. So that might be something you could try in the background. I've tried that. You can also try using salt to create texture. Haven't you done this?
Yeah, watercolour I have. I wonder if it works with I would imagine it should work with acrylics as well, or inks, because basically the salt is just drawing out the moisture, isn't it, from around itself. So I should think that would work.
So what sort of effect did it give you?
What that does is when you sprinkle the salt onto the wash, it pulls the water out from around it. So it almost creates these kind of like little areas where there's no pigment. So for instance, again, if you wanted to, maybe if you were trying to create the effect of a wave crashing against a rock or something like that, it kind of creates an effect of just little spots with no pigment,
right.
But not just spots. They're kind of they're soft and they all merge into each other. So I think the thing to do is just experiment, but I would recommend not using table salt particularly. I mean, that's fine, but I would say perhaps something a bit more coarse than that.
So we on to the actual sketching?
Sometimes we can fall at the first hurdle, so we just simply don't know what to draw. And your sketchbook, it doesn't have to be just used for sketching. It can be a playground where you experiment with your drawing tools and your mediums. So, for instance, if you wanted to try that salt and cling film, use your sketchbook to try it out. You don't have to just create sketches on every page. Another thing you could do is you could make lots of little boxes on a page and fill them with all the different marks you can make with your mediums. I mean, I remember having to do this for art college, and I was amazed with just how many different marks you can make with just a pencil alone. And that was one of our things we had to do, is take an HB pencil and fill as many boxes with as many different marks with just that one pencil. And I learned so much from that, just by changing the angle of your pencil or the pressure. It's quite surprising, actually. If you could try the same with inks, brush pens, pastels, whatever. So that's another thing you could try. And if you're really stuck and you want to sketch, we'll just start with something random, any old shape or squiggle, and then try and use it as inspiration. I'm sure I've seen you do that actually, Tara, haven't I?
Yeah, you can do what I've done before is like create a big squiggle. Like, so, it goes on quite well and it loops over each other. And then you kind of maybe put faces in it, or you could, I'm not really one for patterns, but you could fill it. What's this thing called? Is it
Zentangles?
Yeah, you could fill it with that, or I say like I'd put sort of little faces in different bits, but you can fill it with anything you like, really. And that's similar to another thing you can try, which is you take some coloured paper, you rip or cut it up just into random shapes as a starting point, and then maybe stick 2 or 3 down on one page of your sketchbook. And then I'd create maybe 4 or 5 of those at a time and then come back to them. And I'd do this in the mornings. I used to do sort of little doodle sessions. And you'd look at it and you think, what could that be? What do those 3 blocks look like? Or what could I draw over the top of it? And then you just start, and I'd do a continuous line drawing sort of, and it might be partly going round it, partly going over the top of the coloured paper. And some of them look really nice because you've got this really strong colour and then this black line. Some look a disaster. But yes, I'd done one of them, and on Instagram the other day, someone said, "Oh, I really love those. I'd buy it." And I thought, it was just like a 5-minute doodle. So yeah, definitely something you try out. And by doing that as well, you don't have to feel precious about it, because it's just call it a doodle, and then it's not a proper drawing, and you haven't got to worry.
You could also try using something completely different to what you would normally draw with. So, for example, and we had to do this at college as well, you could apply paint or ink using different tools, so like sponges or twigs, feathers. I mean, the list is absolutely endless, isn't it? But it's a really great way of experimenting. I remember once watching an art programme. I think the new series has just started and I've got it on record. Are you watching... what's it called? The
portrait
painting
one.
Challenge?
Oh no,
no, that's just finished.
I've recorded that one.
Okay, so I watched the last series of that, and a lot of the artists were quite tight and careful. They were all given a mop, basically a mop and a bucket, and they had to dip their mop into this bucket of paint and paint with it. Now, obviously, I'm not suggesting that's a good idea in your sketchbook. I don't think it would.
Was it a little A4? Was it A4 sketchbook?
But basically, it was an experiment, I think, to help them kind of loosen up. It meant that they had to stand right back because obviously the handle was really long. But they really, really enjoyed it. They loved the experiment. So sometimes just trying something new and completely ridiculous can be, can give you quite surprising results.
You could watch YouTube videos. There's so much stuff on there about different things. If you even look up art journaling seems to be so many different techniques of stamping, rollering. So watch a few of those and try things like spraying Inktense pencils with water. You can also look at things like using wax resist. So you either get a candle or like a wax crayon, draw on your page with that, and then apply a wash over the top. Wherever you've got the wax resist, obviously the paint won't stick. And there's masking fluid as well, like we said. And when that is, you just take a brush and apply it. It's a real smelly stuff, isn't it?
I hate it.
Reminds me of Copydex glue.
Yeah.
So you paint.
I never did get on with that. I never got on with it.
Well, the only trouble I found with it, I used to use it years and years ago when I sort of paint watercolours, but it gives a very hard edge.
I think we've mentioned stamps, haven't we? But, you can actually buy stamps. Some people use them just to date their pages. Even that, I quite like it. I've seen it quite a lot online and I really like it.
Jen does that, doesn't she? Jen, who's in our group.
Yes, yeah. I really like that. I really like that look. You can try creating textured backgrounds. You can try laying down something like bubble wrap or lace or even string. And then what you do is you then pull it off once your medium's dry, and it creates all sorts of textural effects. But once again, it is something you just need to experiment with. There's loads of things you could try, do you know what I mean? But the thing is, you've got to make sure it's totally dry before you pull it off, otherwise you won't get that effect. But yeah, all these things, they make for a quirky and eye-catching page. So even if you do a sketch that's not that great, it'll still look really interesting when it's drawn on an unusual background.
Yeah, lifts it, doesn't it? There's something about it, that bit of punch of colour in there. I don't know why.
Yeah.
But obviously one of the things you're probably going to be using your sketchbook mostly for is drawing and sketching, and the ways to make that interesting too. So if you like putting more than one drawing on a page, you can just let them overlap. Something about that, it makes it less precious, but it also gives it something. And that is KD in our group. She did that with the 5-minute drawings. And I just love the way everything kind of merges together slightly. It's really nice.
I've actually got a page like that in one of my sketchbooks. I drew my foot. I was sitting there, I think we were watching TV, and I think Paul might have been watching something I wasn't that interested in. So I started drawing, and I was just drawing my foot. The first drawing didn't go it just wasn't quite right. So I drew another one just directly over the top, but on a different, I basically turned the page around and drew another foot, and then I turned the page around and drew it again. And I must have drawn my foot about 5 or 6 times, and it was just one was overlapping the other, and it turned out to be one of my favourite pages because it was just really interesting. And you couldn't even notice that there was anything wrong with the first foot because there were so many others, and I really like that page. So yeah, it's definitely a good one.
Another thing you can do, and this is especially something with sort of journaling, is incorporate things from your day. And I know you did this. I think you've mentioned it in the past. You did it with a Mars wrapper, but you can put sweet wrappers, tickets, anything like that. You can put that on the page just as a starting point and then work over the top of it. So you've got something about putting borders around your pages, haven't you?
Oh yeah. See, now I've seen this before, and I've done this before as well, where you can just draw a really nice border around every page. But if you've got several sketches on one page, you could draw a border around each one of your sketches and then fill the space between them with black or any colour you like. And that really makes each sketch stand out. Sometimes your sketches could overlap the border, so it looks like it's coming out of the box. So, for instance, if you can imagine, I don't know, say a square border that's been drawn around a plant or something like that. But if you allow some of the leaves to come out from the border, it can really make it look as if, they're popping out from the page. It's really simple, but really effective. Cover bad sketches with Post-it notes. That's something I do from time to time. What you can do is, say, for instance, you get a sketch that you do and you quite like it, but you can see that, I don't know, the eye isn't right, or there's part of it that just isn't right. Instead of trying to cover it up completely, you could stick a Post-it note in your book, just covering the bad part of the sketch, and then draw it again over the top. So then you've got the little bit underneath that's not so good, and then you've got the top bit which proves, yes, I can do it. And it makes it Makes it a bit more interesting as well, having these little things you can lift up and think, oh, I wonder what's under there. Or you could just write silly little notes across it like I do sometimes. It all creates a bit of interest.
Writing it is really good in a book, even if you can't do beautiful writing, which I definitely can't. I did this thing where I took a piece of craft paper, just ripped it out really roughly so it got a really rough edge, and then just wrote something. And I can't even remember what rubbish I was writing, but it was just very, very random. Stuck it down on the sketchbook and then started working over the top of it. And I drew a pair of Wellington boots over top of it. But it's just something about having that writing showing through. It just adds something. But then you can also incorporate words out of magazines. And this goes back to the idea of collage again. And I've done this and worked over it with those Lyra pastels. They're like a kind of waxy pastel. So anything, if you're going to do that, you can either leave the words showing, or you can, partly cover them up. And I kind of like to partly cover them up. You can also create cut-out word poetry. Put those in your sketchbook and then create a design around it. Have you ever done cut-out word poetry?
No. I have done poetry in the past, but not from words cut out of a magazine, no.
Do you know what it is?
Yeah.
Yes.
No, you ought to explain it to anyone who doesn't know.
So all you do is basically flick through a magazine and you cut out any interesting phrases or words that you see. And then when you've got to load them together, and you'll need quite a few, you start sort of seeing if you can put them together anyway to kind of make an interesting phrase or a little poem thing. And you get some quite fun stuff sometimes. So once you've got the bits you like, you can stick them in your sketchbook if you want and kind of work around them, create a design. Or if you're really good at calligraphy, which I'm not, you can just use those as basic, for a starting point for a design. So you could actually write them out yourself and maybe just put the words at the side and sort of partly draw over them. But it's quite a fun thing to try. You can also, on the same drawing of I was talking about the Wellington boot with the text, you can also add a funny one-liner, if you can think of it, to go with your drawing.
You've done loads of these, haven't you?
I love these. So you just take a really ordinary drawing, like a pair of Wellingtons, but then you put something silly on it to make it have a little bit of a slightly different meaning. I think mine, Wellington boots, said something like, love is your partner cleaning your Wellington boots. Because my partner had done them for the weekend. But then I'll put at the bottom, P.S., they are dirty again if you're reading this. Just something. Just something. And he did actually read that. And I did get them washed again, which was very, very useful. So, just put something silly on them. Just, it's all just for fun, really.
Yeah, and if not fun, then words that mean something to you, or even maybe a snippet of conversation that you might have overheard that day. So narrate your sketches. You could do it in bubble form, like the bubbles you get in like a comic book. You could do it like that, or you could just turn it into more of a journal page and just write a bit about your day or why you chose to draw what you did that day. But like you say, some people worry about their handwriting and, it might spoil their page. And if that sounds like you, then you could cut letters from a newspaper. Like you said about cutting words out, you could just cut letters out and then make different words out of the letters. But that's a bit like those letters you see, isn't it? Those kind of murder letters on Miss Marple. But you could do that.
Yes.
Or you could try creating some scriptive text using like a dip pen and then just embrace the splodges. One example of this would, of course, be, who am I going to say?
Danny Gregory.
Yeah. Now, I didn't mention either Danny Gregory or John Bergerman. That's been all you today. But yeah, he uses a dip pen to write little snippets of information next to his drawings. And I don't know, it just makes them all the more quirky, and he's got his own style of writing that he's kind of developed. Everything's kind of quite big and swirly, and if there's ink blots there, it doesn't matter. He just leaves them there. I think that's great. And it's not posh calligraphy. It's just quirky. So you could always try that.
So how does he do his writing? Is it just literally handwriting?
Yeah, what he does is have you never seen him? Have you never watched any of his videos?
Yeah, I've looked at his work, but I just can't think what his writing's like.
Yeah, so he dips his dip pen into his ink, And then say for instance, he does a word that starts with S. He does the top of the S really sort of curly. He does this like a few curls and swirls, and then he takes it down to the rest of the S, and then he'll do the rest of the word slightly more normal. Right. But it's just really, I mean, I remember when you created your own font, didn't you? And you did that, was that for Art Journal January? Where you sort of saying, oh, I didn't like your writing, so you just sort of decided to go with what you didn't like about it and make it something.
Yeah, it was. Yeah,
you know what I'm talking about,
it was prior to that, and I think we've mentioned it before. But yeah, my writing's so bad, and I always wanted to get it nice and neat and in one line. It would never work, so I thought, let's just go with the mistakes almost. So I made it even more wonky, and it actually looked deliberate then, rather than like I was trying to do something properly and I couldn't.
And didn't somebody actually ask you what font you were using? Because they really didn't. They really liked it.
It's funny, isn't it?
So yeah, I really liked it as well. Though it was really
embrace
cool.
the mistakes.
Exactly.
So we've got a few random things now. I think you could stick 2 pages together to hide bad sketches, or make a little pocket so you can slot things in. And I think you can just do what I did and just slap a bit of coloured paper over the top as well. Well, I did last night. Have you got some more ideas?
Well, you could, on that note, instead of sticking 2 bits of paper together, you could actually just stick envelopes onto some of your pages with your double-sided sticky tape, which again you can use to hold random loose sketches or even motivational quotes or whatever you like. Maybe Cheryl might want to use something like that to slot in some poems. You could cut things out that inspire you from magazines and stick them in your book, or slot them in the envelope.
Try not to be precious about your sketchbook. And if you do find you're being really precious, then completely forget about buying a good quality sketchbook for now. Buy a really cheap one. If you do want to, use watercolor or water or anything on it, just glue a few pages together to make it thicker. And that's Megan Jeffrey, who, was she episode 2, 3? I can't remember.
Yeah, I think it was 2.
Yeah, she buys really cheap exercise books, and if she wants to put water or do markers or anything, she just glues a few pages together. So do that, because then you're not worried about messing anything up. You can just try anything then with, if it's just £1 or 2. And also, don't worry if you're going to use the edge of your sketchbook just to jot things down. I do that all the time. If you've got to write a number because suddenly somebody rings you, you've got no other paper to hand. It all just sort of adds to it, I think.
Yeah, little shopping lists and what sort. I think you're absolutely right. I think it does add to the interest in the end. You can use elastic bands to secure other random notes to your sketchbook. And this is always really handy as well when you're sketching outdoors on a windy day. So yeah, you just attach loads of elastic bands to the cover, and then you can just stick things under it and in it. And do you know what? The more battered I think a sketchbook becomes, the more interesting it will look in the end. So don't be too precious about it. Really don't. It needs to have looked like it's had a life.
If you have got any other ideas, if we haven't waffled enough for you, then let us know in the Facebook group. And if you haven't joined that, it's easy to go ahead and join. Just kick in the Creatives Facebook group, or let us know on Instagram.
Just quickly, don't forget the very back of the book. I bought Paul a Valentine's card. I had it made on, was it Moonpig or something like that? And obviously it tells you, doesn't it, that it gives you an option to edit the front cover and then edit the inside and then edit the back. Well, most people don't bother doing the back, but this time I did, and I'd put a little photograph of Sherlock, who's our dog, and his head was on Paul's knee, just looking up at him. I think Paul must have been eating at the time. And underneath I'd put the caption, and don't forget about me, or something like that. So, and the same applies to a sketchbook. What's quite nice is he didn't actually notice that. He didn't notice it. And then a couple of days later, Charlie picked it up and said, "Oh, I didn't realise you'd put something on the back." And Paul said, "Why, what's on the back?" And then he saw it. So it was kind of like a little surprise element. So you could do the same thing on a sketchbook.
That's actually quite a good way to get something printed, isn't it? If you wanted to print a bespoke cover for your sketchbook, you could actually go to one of those card companies, not put in a greeting, but actually upload your sketch for the cover.
I wonder if you can do that on Vistaprint, because they're...
Yeah, but you can't usually get one off. So normally for these things, you have to have 50 or 100. Whereas if it's a card, you can get one. So you could almost just go up there. You don't really want it to be a card.
That's a good idea.
Prepare the front and back. There you go. Yeah. You can do that now. You can put me on the front. That lovely Colin face. Right. We've diverted again, haven't we?
Yes. So, yeah, basically what we were saying is, anyone who has any other ideas, share them with us. Share them on the Facebook group, because that's where it's all happening.
Okay, so we've got the question that we had last week, which is, what is a favourite piece of art you've ever created and why? And we've got some answers. Do you want to read yours first?
I will. And I've only just set eyes on these now, so I haven't had time to read through them. So, Gail Armstrong. So she says, 2 years ago, after becoming self-employed as a creative journaling tutor, I started going to art class. I hadn't drawn or painted much since leaving school 30 odd years earlier. The first class I was given a piece of charcoal and a copy of this photograph and told to draw it. I was so nervous. The room was full of people. I assumed that they were going to be much better than me. As I drew this, it was as though I was watching someone else draw. I really didn't expect to draw anything like this. That day made me realise that I was talented and that I had to continue to draw and paint, and I am now selling artwork and illustrations. Actually, now I've just read that out, I have seen that before. I saw that on the actual, the question post we put on the group. Yeah. And she, with that, I think she put an actual photograph of what she'd drawn, and it was like a man with a beard in the photograph, and she'd drawn it. And she'd sort of stuck the two together and photographed it, and it was really good. So yeah, really lovely.
But you do that thing, don't you? Do you find when you draw, sometimes afterwards it doesn't feel like it's you drawing it?
Well, when it turns out really well, yeah. It's like, oh, did I do that? Yeah. Absolutely, I know that feeling very well. Nick Tay West. Is that right?
I think so.
Nick Tay West. My favourite changes with every finished commission, and it literally lasts only a few minutes. When the client approves a drawing, I think, yes, I succeeded in the challenge. It's all forgotten when the next request comes in. Carolina Newman. Tricky question. I have a house full of sketches, but I think I'm most proud of these two first tries at oil painting. I absolutely love this medium, and I can't imagine why on earth I was scared of using it. It's so forgiving. And once again, Carolina, I saw hers as well, and she put 2 portrait oil paintings, I think, and they were beautiful. So if they were her first tries, I mean, that's just amazing, really is. Faiza Sheikhzada, she says, a sketch I did in the library. I drew someone sitting at the tables. I love it because I had a long art block, and this was one of the first sketches in my brand new empty sketchbook. And secondly, I remember I was completely absorbed in the moment and wasn't thinking about the outcome. It was also one of my first drawings with continuous lines. Continuous lines for me ended up meaning not stopping and thinking, just drawing for pleasure.
I've got a few more. So I've got Angela Murphy. I go through spells of loving what I do and hating what I do, seeing mistakes in everything I do. But if I can think of things I've done, I always come back to one piece. I posted before how much I love the work of Sulamith Wolfing, and I attempted her work, The Giant. I love all the intricacies of her work. So my favourite piece of work, unfortunately a plagiarised piece. That's quite sad, but I still like it. Now, I think if you just copy something purely for your own learning and fun, I don't think that is plagiarism.
No, if plagiarism would be if you copied it and then claimed it to be yours, wouldn't it?
But she's doing it purely for the fun of it and for the educational. And I'm sure the artist would be absolutely fine with that.
And there's nothing wrong with that. And I saw that one as well, and it was beautiful.
Yeah. So we've also got Shilpa Rajiv. She said, for me, whatever I created last is the best, because through practice, I'm learning more techniques and the drawings are getting more refined. So each one is getting better and better. After all, learning is a constant process. Cheryl Martin, don't know if mine counts because my greatest creation is a poem. I'm a poet. I won a competition with a prompt, and the category was The Kiss. She's actually put her poem in the Facebook group if you'd like to read that. And she also says she's only been drawing for 8 months, but at Christmas she went to a friend's paint party and they had to paint a nativity scene on wood. She took the worst bumpy piece, so she thought hers would be dreadful and it wouldn't matter when she did it. But someone in the group actually bought it, which just goes to show you.
And I read her poem. It was absolutely lovely. I'm not surprised at all it won a competition.
Sally Ann Millard. I got into drawing through online challenges in February. I've always been able to draw but not known just what I should do. A passion has been ignited. I just kept on seeing so many things I want to draw. I'm most proud of Bagpuss, as I can't believe I drew him. And she's done a really good drawing of Bagpuss in there. We have got a couple of late ones. Claire Dunphy, this is one that came in, I think, last night. When I was 14, I painted a scene from imagination with lots of people walking by. They were more like stick people. I wasn't really sure about the painting. My art teacher said it was a great impression of a Lawrence Lowry. I had no clue who he was. After researching him and his art in the library, as we had to do then, I felt quite proud of what I'd done.
I actually saw this last night. I did see her post it last night, and Lowry, I love his stuff. Do you remember the Matchstick Cats and Dogs that was in the charts when I was probably in the 70s? I've actually got that on my playlist.
Who was that by?
Can't remember who it was by, but it was about Lowry, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I really like his stuff.
Then we've got one last one, Savannah Merris. I've been able to draw since I was no age at all, and after I left school a few years ago, I stopped drawing. Until the other day, I drew this off the top of my head, and she's got this photo of a hand that she's drawn. I think it's got a mouth in the palm of the hand. A little last night or this morning that was added. I think that's it.
So today's question is, how do you get over the fear of the blank page? So how do you get over the fear of the blank page?
As always, you can tweet us your answers at Kit Creatives or let us know in the Facebook group, which, by the way, if you haven't already joined, I highly recommend you do. We will put the question up there and also on the Facebook page and, of course, on Instagram, which is also Kicking the Creatives. And we just want to let you know about the 3 challenges that we've got coming up for May.
What have we got in May at the moment? We have got Miniature May. That is completing and posting one miniature piece of artwork every day throughout the month of May. There are obviously some rules for that one on size and whatnot, so you can have a look at that on the website. There is also Imagination May, which is we're challenging you to draw something from your imagination every day throughout the month of May. And Quick Kicks May, I think we are doing drawing left-handed. I think the poetry one we'll do a bit later in the year. We will confirm when that's going to be, but I think we've got enough for May. Yes. Don't forget to pop over to our website at kickinthecreatives.com to find out how you can take part in some of those creative challenges. Also, if you haven't already signed up for the newsletter, it's well worth doing that because, towards the end of each month, you will get an email that will go into your inbox telling you what are the challenges coming up for the next month, and it'll give you the link to where you can read all about those. So that's it. I think we're done.
Okay. See you next time.
See you soon. Bye. Thank you so much for listening. We hope you enjoyed the episode, and if you did, perhaps you'd like to share it and leave a review for us on iTunes. Back soon.